I guess ahead of the curve is going to start with me for the first time using this gadget in giving my remarks. I always feel a bit challenged when I'm supposed to be using these gadgets. You see, this is how it's going to start. I've already said greetings to all of you. And I also want to express the appreciation for the colleagues that when we say we want to have an event on the Africa Month, they never even stop for a moment, because as a country, we have to remain resolute that South Africa is not an island. South Africa is part of this continent. And we have to also make our fellow Africans to remind themselves all the time that whether they are in Rwanda, whether they were in Zimbabwe, whether they were in Guinea-Bissau, they have to remember that they owe it to this continent to make it a success. And this movement that was started of getting communicators in the continent to use this week to just reflect. And I think Reho was talking about the theme for this year, which says, ahead of the curve, what's next for comms in Africa? It's so appropriate, because when I was reading it and I was thinking to myself, when I started working in GCIS, where were we with communication? When we were in 1976, where were we with the communication, and what was the narrative? And I think this theme is helping us to think through what is it that we can do as the communications practitioners in changing the narrative of our continent. And I think this theme is really going to be unpacked in the rest of this week, because we want to make sure that we understand what is it that we need to do to make sure that we carry the narrative of the Africa that we want. We also want to reflect that we chose the Constitutional Hill for a simple reason, that it is a structure that must never be forgotten, that the freedom that we enjoy today, a lot of sad stories came out from this particular structure. I was remarking to Amina when I was freezing, and I said, oh, this place, by the way, was a prison. And that's where I actually got my frostbites because of the cement, that this cement was done on purpose to try and make sure that when you get into these walls, yes, there was an issue of security, but they made sure that they rub in the atrocities that they were systematic. The apartheid system was very, very systematic, that it was not a mistake that they couldn't put mats in those cells. They put a cement for the simple reason that they want to make sure when you leave, whether it's after 10 years or after 15 years, some damage has happened to you. And you see it all the time when people write their books and they tell you what they have had to endure. And what was pleasing for me when I was coming out and I saw school kids, and I just had to admire that our education system must never miss telling the story to young people, because sometimes our young people have tended to say, no, we are tired of your history. We're tired of you telling the story. But I think the education system, as long as they make that kind of an effort to take students to come and learn about their history. And I want to believe that this does happen even in other African countries. I went to Tanzania on some of these heritage visits of Department of Arts and Culture. And also it was pleasing that they had to take us through some of their history. But what was more also for fulfilling for us as a delegation from South Africa, they took us to places where South Africans were staying, and their contribution, the Somafco, we went to that Somafco school, that land was donated to South Africans. We didn't pay for that land, but they made that land available for South Africans who were in exile to make sure that they go to school. A lot of the South Africans that came from exile, a lot of them are engineers, a lot of them are lawyers, a lot of them are in different levels of academic career. It was the contribution that was made by some of those African leaders. Zambia, you can go on and on about their contribution to the continent freedom, and I'm particularly saying to the continent's contribution, because they never viewed their contribution as a contribution for South Africa only. They saw it as our resolve as an African Union to say we want this continent to be free. And they have done exactly that. And I think this week will also be a week where we celebrate some of these successes, but I think we must not shy away from saying that we still have some challenges. But I think my remarks here, I want to celebrate the successes. Let somebody else talk about our failures. But hey, we've done our successes. We were confronted with COVID, which we didn't even know what it is, and it was declared, and we were all in a panic. And I remember the first time we hosted communicators across the board in GCIS. I think we had the one first forum. We had communicators from the private sector, we had communicators from the media, we had the communicators from government, all of them saying, what can we do? And it was a pleasing experience because a lot of us didn't even know what this monster called wearing a mask, this monster called keeping a social distance. But it was communicators that said, we want to help. And I remember we were getting content from the Department of Health, and all the communicators that were in our premises, they came with their memory stick, with their portals to say, give us, we want to use it, and we want to make sure that we spread the word. I think we all have to look around how the shops, the malls, they came to the party. Everybody was saying, we want to help. And that's the Africa we want. We saw how the African continent clubbed together to say, let's learn from each other. And I remember one of the webinars that we hosted last year, I think Ayanda will remember, we learned from the DRC how they did their mass mobilization with Ebola. And that's the kind of a collaboration for the communicators in the continent. We learned from the lady who was sharing with us how they did their mass mobilization to sensitize the communities in those regions where the Ebola was attacking. It was a lesson for us, but we also used the platform to also share with the other African countries how we were tackling the COVID-19. I think I can go on and on about how we respond when we are faced with challenges. But allow me, Chairperson, to also remark about some of our successes. You know, they keep saying that the continent is not succeeding. But the continent that I am telling the story about is a continent that have gone out and said, as we are going to put together an Africa Free Trade Agreement. Because it can be a continent with such huge potential, and we allow that potential to be taken away by others, and then we sit back and we look and we wait for France to send the wine to some of the African countries when we have the wine here. We sit and we wait to buy cocoa from Europe when there is an African country that is selling. We've done the agreement. We are very happy that it is on the way for being implemented, because the rules of origin, which had to be threshed out, had to be finalized. And I think we are happy today to say that those rules of origin, that the product, when it comes to us, this is how the pricing is going to be. And I see no reason why it shouldn't be something that we celebrate. We remarked about making the Africa we want, that it can only succeed if the infrastructure is put in place. It's well and good to have these agreements, but how are you going to bring that cocoa to South Africa? How are you going to take that wine that you are saying you are producing as South Africa to these outlying countries? Again, I'm happy to say we want to celebrate that. And I want to celebrate because this is not an infrastructure project that is done by South Africa alone. Last year, just before we went to December, I had an opportunity to go and see what Zimbabwe is doing at the Beit Bridge. A massive revamping of that Beit Bridge, which is going to enable a free flow of traffic in that area. It's something that we should commend. The work that has been done by South Africa from the Messina side, a lot of people have heard those stories of the congestion that you see in the Messina when you are traveling, the trucks are moving to the continent. Go and see it now. It is a pride of South Africa. Go to the Richmond Bridge that has been done by Mozambique in partnership, I think, with the Chinese or private thing. They have built a bridge that allows the movement of goods from the KZN to Mozambique. They've reduced a 6-hour trip to about 30 or 45 minutes. And that's this Africa we should be celebrating. And I can go on and on about some of the projects that, by Deloitte's almost acknowledgement, that in their index where they are recording some of the successes that we have done, they are saying the infrastructure projects of the continent have increased. If that is not a success story, I don't know what it is. We've got a number of companies, the one that was launched by our president in Cape Town, the biggest pharmaceutical company, that is going to make sure that we begin to tackle this isolation that we have to go and join the queue when we want drugs. Today we are saying we have set up a huge infrastructure together with the private company, Dr. Song Yang, who has opened an infrastructure of the pharmaceutical. That project is going to make sure that we become resourceful as a continent when it comes to vaccines. And we can go on and on and on without really taking the time of the chairperson, because I was told to give the opening remarks. But I'm saying that, colleagues, this week is also going to tackle us. How do we adapt to the manner in which communication gets consumed? We're very much alive to the fact that we are a developing country, but also we have to be alive to the digital space in how information is consumed in the continent. How do we adapt to also the challenges of digital space, because it also comes with its own challenges of fake news. How do we become agile enough to be able to adapt to that? And I'm saying that we have to engage with how we move forward in telling our story, but we must not leave anyone behind, because that Makulu in Tsentani and that Gogo in Gwavuma, we need to understand that he's not on a Twitter or on a smartphone. She still needs that information. She still needs us to tell that Gogo in Gwavuma that relationship they have with Mozambique. We still have to tell that Gogo in Piet Retief how they are interlinked as the Swaziland, because they remain a continent that has to succeed. And in Tsentane, we need to make sure that that Makulu is not left out when he wants to know what is it that he needs to do to get land. Which coincidentally this week we will be having a land summit. A lot of our South Africans still struggle with the land. How do they access land? How do we get South Africans to know what support base do we have to provide them with the land? And all of these things, they force communicators to think very hard on how they assist. And I think without wasting any time, Chairperson, let me stop here and say that we're looking forward to more engagement, and I'm hoping this week also we will hear from some of the countries of what is it that they have in stock for the continent in as far as the communication as a profession. And I thank you.
Thank you, DG Williams. Just before I continue, just to note there's changes in the program, because next in the program is the program that you have has got the Minister, Mondli Gungubele, as the next speaker. The Minister is unable to join us this morning. I'm sure you are aware of the rains that happened this weekend. Further rains, other than the ones that we know of, but there's further devastation in KZN. You wonder why KZN, but that's what's happening now. And the minister had to attend an urgent meeting that he was called for by cabinet. Changing the narrative of the continent. Yes, DG remarked. How is it that as communicators, we are changing the narrative? And it's true that to know where you're going, you need to understand the history of where you come from. Telling a story or conversations, it's actually in our DNA. So in communicating, in being ahead of the curve as communicators joined together here, under the banner of Africa Communications Week. How is it that we're going to tell the story of Africa, that we position Africa to take space in Europe, in the Americas, in Asia, in Australasia? How is it that we can learn from our brothers and sisters in Congo, in Nigeria, who are also this week holding their own Africa Communicators Week? How is it they will learn from each other? Because there is, DG, that you mentioned, the mass mobilization is something that is unique to to Africa. And we should actually harness those gifts that we have as a continent. The program adjustment now will call for the introduction of Brand SA, so we'll have a representative from Brand SA as a custodian of the national brand. We have Mr. Tshepiso Malele, who is the country head of China, but he is representing Brand South Africa in China. He is the one that we can go to and say, how is it that the Chinese are viewing Africa as a whole and South Africa, and how is it as a brand that we are actually taking space in those platforms? Just briefly about Tshepiso. Tshepiso is a chartered marketer, currently in a position of acting country head in charge of brand South Africa operations in China. I hope he can teach us a bit of Mandarin. We know how much of interest China has in Africa. They saw something, and I'm sure you can also tell us a lot more about that. He's responsible for formulation and delivery of marketing strategies and initiatives that contribute towards building the South African nation's brand. Brand South Africa is the country's marketing and reputation management agency reporting to the brand. And I just want to also state that Brand South Africa is an entity of GCIS. Thank you, Tshepiso, you can come through.
Thank you very much, Program Director. DG Williams, all esteemed officials, our communications, fellow communications practitioners, colleagues, and guests. Very good morning. As introduced, I'm Tshepiso Malele, representing Brand South Africa. Our head office today, and not necessarily from the perspective of China, but yes, as mentioned, there are interesting learnings that we have taken from my experience in China. Unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, it hasn't been possible to travel to China for the past 2 years. But what I can share very quickly before getting into the main points about today is the fact that from the perspective of perceptions of the continent of Africa as a whole, there is a lot of opportunity for us and a lot of work for us to do in making sure that there's a broader understanding of what Africa really is about, a broader understanding of the strong and positive attributes of Africa amongst a Chinese audience. In my experience, I've seen how something that happens in West Africa impacts the overall perception of the entire continent. There's often not an understanding of how vast the continent is. Something happens in South Africa, people in China won't necessarily understand how far South Africa is from the DRC, for example, or from Tanzania. So there's that aggregation of perceptions, of ideas, and so understanding that, I think, underscores and highlights the importance of us working together as a continent to make sure that we proactively manage the way in which we are seen, manage the way in which our audiences internationally feel about us, because ultimately that's what's going to help us achieve our broader objectives as a continent. But just getting back into the main points that I've prepared for today, I'd like to start off by introducing Brand South Africa. As mentioned briefly just a minute ago, we are the official marketing and reputation management agency for the country. We work very closely with our colleagues at GCIS, various other government departments, because managing the nation brand is, though we, Brand South Africa, are the custodians of this brand, the brand is, the construct of the nation brand itself is such that it is dependent on the contributions and the behaviors of a wide variety of stakeholders who may sit within government, within business, within civil society, and indeed within the media space. And the interaction of all of those stakeholders then ultimately contributes to the overall message and the overall perception that gets formed about the entire country as a whole. And so our work really revolves around harnessing and balancing all of those interactions and making sure that we can then extract the strengths that lie within each of those key stakeholders in order then to strengthen our nation brand in a credible and effective way. So as the custodians, really our mandate revolves around, first of all, domestically, making sure that we seek the involvement of South Africans in contributing towards building pride, patriotism, as well as active citizenship, so that we are able to build an authentic nation brand that involves ordinary South Africans, so that when the lived experience of that brand is seen on the ground, it really represents who we really are as South Africa. Then importantly, from an international perspective, we need to do work that contributes towards strengthening the brand and positioning South Africa competitively in the global space, such that we can be able to attract our fair share of investment from international investors wherever they may be sitting around the globe. So as the custodians, our work really is dependent and calls upon us to make sure that we seek the involvement and cooperation of a wide range of stakeholders, as I mentioned, as there is that interdependency across stakeholders. And so as we do this work, we seek not only to deliver benefit for South Africa, but for the continent as a whole, ultimately. And we work and harness all of these relationships to make sure that we drive a strong, distinctive, and accurate narrative that really paints a picture, the picture that we want to be seen not only on the continent as a whole, but internationally. So really making sure that we use our power and our efforts and our relationships to harness all of those different aspects. As Brand South Africa, once again, we are proud to be part of the Africa Communications Week activities. We really are excited and enthusiastic in being able to contribute towards the rollout of the activities of the week. We will have other colleagues who will participate on the program during the course of the week. For example, we'll have the sharing of insights and looking at how then we can leverage those nation brand insights in order then to contribute towards building up not only South Africa's country reputation, but the continental reputation as a whole. So as we look ahead under the theme ahead of the curve, what's next for communications in Africa, we really then have to see what it is that needs to be done now in order for us to get ahead of that curve and make sure that we're able to manage those key aspects ahead of time and preempt them and make sure that we retain control of how things roll out and how the communication space within Africa can really be enabled and strengthened and used strategically for the achievement of the overall objectives of our country. It is an important theme to explore as Africa navigates various communications challenges and heeds a multitude of opportunities in the telecommunications and digital economy space. The transformative potential of communications in Africa indeed is substantial. Your role as communicators goes a long way in ensuring Africa's development. Your storytelling and information sharing can lead to the economic growth and restructuring that we all desire as Africans. And so as Brand South Africa, once again, we really wish all of our colleagues well during the course of this week as the activities roll out. And we look forward to fruitful interactions and engagement and sharing of ideas through the course of the week, including the celebration of Africa Day on Wednesday. And we wish all of our brothers and sisters a happy Africa Month, and wish you success throughout the course of the week. And we also hope that we can all operate effectively whilst remaining safe and healthy. Thank you very much from Brand South Africa.
Thank you, Tepiso. I think you forgot one thing, one or two words in Mandarin. Unless you've forgotten in the past 2 years that you have not been able to travel there. But thank you for those remarks and that introduction of what Brand SA is all about. And I think it's important that the narrative that comes out of us communicators is a positive one. Sometimes we are the ones who actually do damage unto ourselves when we fail to recognize the good stories or actually spend extra time and harness or search for what is good and positive that can be portrayed on a global scale and to the likes of China, which is one of the global giants that can actually change the landscape of South Africa. Our program is evolving. However, you will not lose the richness that will come out of this session today and the rest of the week. Your program for 11:50, I think we are 10 minutes ahead. Thank you, Tsepiso and DG, for sparing us those 10 minutes. We were meant to have the AU representative who was going to give us on what's next for South Africa. She is actually gonna come in the afternoon, so just to ensure that everyone stays in after lunch, we have moved her to that. And in her space, then we have kindly asked Ms. Amina Frenze from SADC Media Awards to take that session. And SADC is a very important partner to South Africa, the neighboring states, as you are aware, in terms of their position and the geographic position, actually becomes borders within the provinces of South Africa. And as such, it's a very key trade partner, communication partner, and that's why we have them here as well as a key participant and contributor towards the conversations that we're having in this week. Amina, I'll kindly ask you to ascend to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you, Program Director. Thank you, DG. Thank you, Brand SA. You've said much. I'm very happy to be here, very happy to participate in this Africa Communication Week. You have heard from our DG how important that is. So I'm the chairperson of the SADC Media Awards in South Africa, the national chairperson, and I'll tell you more about that in a moment. I'd like to acknowledge everyone present here today. I'd like to acknowledge my fellow adjudicators on the SADC Media Awards. It's a lot of hard work, and it's great that we have an infrastructure such as GCIS in our country to help us along, to do the administration, to do quite a lot of work that we would otherwise have to do. But a little bit about myself and some of my fellow adjudicators. We're all media practitioners. We all come from various areas in the media industry, which is under siege, under threat to some extent, but growth in other areas. So very, very important that we recognize media complaints from the public, in print media as well as online media. My other organization is SANEF, the South African National Editors Forum, and I have our colleagues here, our executive director from SANEF as well. And another organization is the Institute for the Advancement of Journalism. It's an institute that was founded in South Africa just before our democracy in South Africa to upskill tertiary mid-career journalists, but in the meantime, we've expanded to a media, and COVID slowed us down a little bit in terms of doing the actual physical training, but a lot of our courses are online. And that brings the challenge of the cost of data in South Africa as well as in other countries of the world. But we are still there, and we're doing all kinds of training and communication training amongst our clients. We have many government organizations in South Africa as well as outside South Africa. So I think it's one of the organizations that we can look at how can we expand, how can we reach out in partnership with other organizations here of how we can do that. I think in the age of digitization, I think we can do much, much more. We have learned that we don't have to travel in order to communicate effectively. So I think the pandemic has just sent us in a spin and sent us in a positive spin in a sense that we can reach out, we can communicate, we can do virtual Where do we reach the Gogos? Where do we reach those in remote areas in our own country before we even reach out to other countries in terms of the cost of data? And I think that is on our agenda and has to be there. Public interest journalism, very, very important. It's important that we inform our citizenry, our electorate, as well as the SADC region where we operate in, as well as further afield in the rest of the continent. So with the internet, we often talk about the democratization of society with the internet. But we have also experienced that the internet can be closed down just like that. In other words, curtailing, curbing, killing freedom of expression, freedom of speech. And that is a very, very dangerous development. I think we need to be aware of it. If it's not happening in our country, it's happening in other countries on our African continent. It is not healthy. And I think whatever means that we have, like our DG and others, at the level of communication, at heads of state level, I think that is where one needs to directly intervene or express our intolerance of the closing down of avenues of communication and freedom of expression and repression of journalists and journalism. Now, that's not only happening in Africa, as we know. It's also happening in many other parts of the world. Journalists lose their lives for telling the story, for explaining, publicizing the narrative. And normally the narrative of people who are at risk, whether it's in Myanmar, whether it is anywhere else in the world. We've just seen the latest example of what has happened in Palestine. Well-renowned journalist for 25 years who's been cut down, shut down, because she has been speaking and reporting the narrative, the truth. So be aware of those who want to shut us up as journalists, as media, as explaining our narratives. Our narratives are important. The truth is important. So I think be aware of it. Don't tolerate it. And to really pick up on what our DG has said, we have so many stories to tell. But we're not hearing enough of those stories. We find less and less stories of what is happening, the positive stories in Africa, as well as in our case with our awards, the media awards in the SADC area. There's so much happening. We know that, we see that, but it's reported, but sometimes these articles are not entered in this competition. And this competition is a very prestigious award. It's a very prestigious competition. I don't know if there's any other awards where the heads of state are present to really acknowledge and commend those who participated, as well as those who were lucky enough to win the prize. So the stories are there. Some of the stories are still not told, and some of the beautiful stories, they are just not publicized adequately, perhaps, and perhaps not entered in the competition. So that is very, very important. We had in South Africa, all the different countries, for those who don't know, we have a national adjudication committee, and some of my, I have, for example, Ms. Faz Dahal, who has worked for Channel Africa, and she has covered the world and won multiple awards, including several SADC Media Awards for her work. There's Mr. Nyana Moleti, there's Tsepo, and these are all very hardworking media practitioners who have a passion of getting the stories, publicizing the stories, adjudicating the stories as well. And I can tell you we're a tough bunch. If the quality is not up to standard, it just gets rejected. We do not even entertain, bad quality if it doesn't fulfill all the elements. So the awards are important. It's very prestigious, and it is open. It used to be open only to South Africans in South Africa, But for the past 2 years, I think, the past 2 years, I think that all SADC nationals can enter this award. So if you're from Zimbabwe, Malawi, Tanzania, wherever, you can enter the award in South Africa as long as it's published in a recognized publication. And I really would like to take this platform to welcome looking at those awards and entering those awards and telling our stories. It is good for business, it's good for democracy, it's good for social cohesion, it's good for uniting and integrating not only our SADC region, but the continent. But to just come back to how big our continent is, it's huge, it's huge. Just last month, I was traveling from South Africa to Senegal. We flew from Johannesburg to Nairobi, that's about 4 hours. From Nairobi to Dakar, 10 hours. That's how big our continent is. Now, if you go from south, let's say from Johannesburg to London, it's 10 or 11 hours. But that same distance from the east of Africa to the west of Africa is 10 hours. That is how vast our continent is. Now, our continent has been colonized, as we know. You know, some Belgian king grabbed the Congo, grabbed it without even having been here, having set foot on the continent. A whole continent, a whole country he grabbed, the Congo Basin, because it had resources, it could be a slave colony, and we are still suffering from the legacy of that colonialism. It's never an excuse, but the colonial legacy, it is important. It's an important narrative as well that we need to contextualize. It's still happening today. Our resources are still, comes at a prime price. So it is a context that we need to understand and need to explain to our people and our electorate. It's not always possible for anyone to grasp, really make that clear to our citizenry, to our electorate, and to the rest of the world. So I thank you very much for being here, Africa Communication Week. I really am looking forward on how we can promote this Africa Communication Week. Maybe by next year, this time, we would come with what partnerships we have. We can celebrate the partnerships we have, and we can celebrate the journalism, media, and storytellers on this continent that they've reached out to tell the story. So I thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much, Amina, for those words, and to reiterate the importance of telling our stories. And I think the fact that you've opened the awards, the media awards, to other countries in Africa, it would actually expand our reach and the interests of the richness of what comes out of this continent. You mentioned that the awards are still open. I think it's very important that perhaps maybe you give an opportunity, or I'll give you a space that you actually give us how to enter, and the email address, if there's an opportunity that colleagues can perhaps still send meaningful stories that can come through.
Thanks very much. Just briefly, for those who don't know, we have a timetable, articles already. We have adjudicated them, and these are now going for regional adjudication. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Amina, for that. You also mentioned that the truth is important. to actually write stories of truth. And we as communicators, as journalists, as writers, we get into this industry because of the passion that we have. And if we don't stand for truth, we would have lost our ways. And you also mentioned that, you know, we have a lot of stories in Africa, but we are not actually making, perhaps we are making a difference, but not enough. So does that mean that media space that we find ourselves, what the internet, what social media, what multimedia channels can do to change the platform of media? I think the print media partners have found their business model having to evolve completely to something that looks different to what they were 10 years ago. So doing more might mean that we look at different platforms, or we mix the multi-channel approach. We are here to learn. Remember, the theme of this Africa Communications Week is above the curve. And when looking at what above the curve means, it says the above average innovative performance or quality, especially of a trailblazer, developing advances before competitors. So you may ask, who are competitors? We are stakeholders, and we may be competitors in our various media platforms. But at the end of the day, our stories, and as communicators, we are our partner from Facebook. They now refer themselves as Meta. This is their new logo. Facebook is a disruptor, as one of the social media that has the largest audience. Nomonde is the largest audience in the world in terms of numbers. And to think of the way it was started out of a garage, but it shows just the innovation that we apply in doing our daily work, how it can actually become a disruptor and something of a force to be reckoned with. Just briefly about Nomonde. Nomonde is the head of public policy for Southern African region at Facebook. She is a counselor at the ICASA, which is the regulator for public telecommunication, broadcasting, and postal services sector. She possesses 28 years experience in broader media sector, having worked in the space of content development, production, and scheduling. And most of the programs she has worked on are also outreach programs in MultiChoice. And she's contributed in a form of conference papers, in a form of articles. And I guess all of us are really ready to hear what is it that they can give us in terms of what is next for Africa. Thank you, Nomonde.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'm gonna have to try to open this. Let's do this. Molweni, good morning, Dumelang. Great to be here. It feels like a homecoming for me, seeing people that I've worked with in the past, in the broadcasting landscape, seeing my former colleagues from the SADC Media Awards. Just a point of correction, I used to work for ICASA as a counselor. Straight out of ICASA, I then joined Meta, now known as Facebook. A very good morning to you, esteemed colleagues, and Sis Pumla. We are proud to be an integral part of this, contributing to Africa's development. The world we come together in today is radically changed from just a few years ago. The rapid pace of technological innovation, combined with the disruptive effects of COVID-19 pandemic, forces us to be adaptive and responsive as communications professionals to the new digital environment. These changes have been challenging in many regards, not least in the devastating economic effects of the pandemic and the rapid transition to greater dependence on digital technologies than ever before. However, it has also shown us the opportunities that come from disruption. Africa is now starting to have a leading voice on issues of digital innovation, and the narrative of Africa is one of opportunity and technological opportunities. Research has found that technology and innovation frames are widely used in the coverage of business in Africa, and that coverage of technology is one of the few issues that receive positive media attention in both African and global media. The rise of social media in Africa that is shaped by social media, disrupting the single narrative. The role of social media in distributing and enabling access to health information has been critical during the pandemic, and we've witnessed new innovative ways using Facebook, WhatsApp, and other online tools that have played an important role in providing credible information to African citizens during this challenging time. We at Meta, formerly known as Facebook, have also doubled down our own efforts to enable new opportunities for digital businesses during this time. Increasing reliance on ICTs from smartphones and informal sectors, and contributed 8.5% of the GDP of sub-Saharan Africa in terms of economic value. Online communications businesses are particularly thriving in the current environment. It is therefore clear that digital economy has the potential to accelerate African development, and that social media platforms are catalysts in the formation and growth of new SMBs. Now, in this dynamic period for the African digital economy, we must prioritize the inclusion of young people and women in Meta's vision of equitable financial growth. Research shows that online platforms, including Meta's, help promote the creation of economic opportunities for young people and help support the achievement of gender parity. Those SMBs that have most adapted and adopted to digital technologies have weathered the crisis of COVID-19 better. As a community, we need to do more to distribute the skills to do this to more small, medium businesses across the continent. This is why we are expanding our support for digital literacy training programs across the continent. Meta Boost, She Means Business, and Digify Pro. Just to explain this is a 2-month boot camp that prepares digital marketers for jobs in the industry. In addition, also in July, beginning of July, we will also be hosting a 2-day SMB summit here in Johannesburg. Our end goal is to support SMBs and share with them on how to best leverage our digital tools across our family of apps, namely Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. We at Meta are also delving into the metaverse. I'm sure you've heard a lot being said about the metaverse as a new area of opportunity for communications. The metaverse offers immense potential in terms of new avenues for innovation in the sharing of information and communications, and we believe it will transform how we as a society work and connect with others remotely. Further, we believe that Africans can be true co-creators and developers of this next wave of technological development. As a matter of fact, there is a pilot program that we are putting in place, which will also involve African creators to make sure that they too are not left behind as we develop the metaverse. Metaverse growth projections released recently, about 2 weeks ago, by Analysis Group, a research company contracted by us as Meta, indicate that the metaverse will pump an additional $40 billion into the sub-Saharan Africa's GDP in a decade's time. At Meta, we are, however, acutely aware that alongside the empowering potential of technology, there has been a proliferation of online harms facilitated or aggravated by the internet, social media, and other forms of ICTs. As the public policy team, we are working hard to address new online threats such as hate speech, online gender-based violence, and misinformation. Further, as Meta in 2021, we commissioned a SADC online gender-based violence research study. This study was undertaken by the University of Pretoria. The inquiry of this study was seeking to understand the impact of online gender-based violence. Ladies and gentlemen, I am happy to also be taking place right here at the Constitutional Hill, I suppose also for, sentimental reason because of the history of the women's jail. The report maps out the state of online gender-based violence in 8 Southern African countries, a region that help to mitigate the impact of online gender violence on women, girls, people living with disabilities, and LGBTIQ persons in Africa. Now, combating mis- and disinformation online requires a multidimensional approach that includes public education, fact-checking, independent regulation, and effective self-regulation by mainstream media and social media platforms. Policy and law reform processes are underway across the region. Processes are important. There is a need for parallel processes to inform and to empower users about their rights and their options. As Meta, we are committed to continuing our work with feminists, activists, civil society, and states to protect users and equally provide opportunities for users to be empowered in their responses to online gender-based violence. Finally, Sub-Saharan Africa was connected to the internet by the end of 2020. We are looking as Meta at a variety of other interventions to address these online harms and risks, and are actively engaging with a wide range of partners to develop new and effective interventions to these challenges in the communication space, and we welcome your further engagements on these particular topics. Through collective efforts and engagements, we can pave a path towards realizing a wonderful ideals of the internet and digital spaces. Your role as communications professionals in this complicated new information ecosystem is vital. The participants here today and with us throughout the week have a crucial role to play as a source of credible, reliable information in the new digital ecosystem in facilitating the growth and development of new business models that can leverage the opportunities presented by the metaverse, social media, and other digital technologies. Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome this opportunity to learn from and reflect with you all as communications practitioners that are experts in this space, and to discuss what more we can do to contribute to a communication sector that is safe, empowering, and thriving. And we look forward to the productive conversations that are to come during the course of the week. We thank you once again for this opportunity. Enkosi, ndiyabulela.
Thank you so much, Nomonde, for that rich impartation of your address on META. And I think we learned a lot. I think, I hope all our ears were, mine were a little bit sharper because I heard a lot of terms like metaverse. I think there's quite a lot of things that we can learn from social media platforms. They are disruptors. We can learn from them. They are making a change into our societies. I think from government, Nomonde, I speak from GCIS. I didn't consult my DG, but I think the online platform that you're establishing for GBV will greatly be appreciated in the government space because it's a pandemic that we deal with on a daily basis. And I'm thinking that perhaps when we have an Africa Week, the organizers, Ayanda, that we also invite the stakeholders that enable communications, like your telecommunication partners, to have an online platform like for that you've just announced here, that it be zero rated, so that reaching Ugogo or Mapule, who's somewhere in rural Limpopo, and she doesn't have data, you know, how is it that she's able to access that online platform without spending money? So I think it calls for your telecommunicators, your Vodacoms and MTNs, that they come on board to actually give us that catapult platform to ensure that we make a difference and our stories are told. And we cannot ignore the challenges that we face as Africa, as South Africa, and our positive stories, our stories, we find that most of them is poverty, is unemployment, that we currently find most of South Africans and Africans dealing with. You also mentioned economic opportunities. I think the advent of COVID has also shown that economies of the world, is not just Africa, but the economies of the world are actually shrinking. The cost of living is getting higher and higher. Every time you go and pour petrol or diesel in your automobile, you actually get surprised that when did the price go up again? So it's actually a surprise all the time. And the economic opportunities will actually come from small businesses, and creating platforms for small businesses will actually come a long way. And those are the conversations as well that we can take out. How is it that we're creating opportunities that are much required in Africa? And how is it that we are attracting them? I think we are closer to lunch if our stomachs are already rumbling or already indicating that there's something missing. But I'd like to call on our representative from SANEF, South African National Editors Forum, Mr. Sibusiso Ngwala, who's the chairperson. SANEF is a key stakeholder that actually guides how we write, whether it's correct, whether it's acceptable, whether it meets the standards of the citizens, of the consumers, of all stakeholders, and they are that body that we actually need in this forum and in the communicators forum widely. But just briefly about Sibusiso. Sibusiso is a journalist with 18 years experience. Sibu, known as Boo, held a number of senior positions at various media organizations, including as political editor of Sunday Times, editor-in-chief of the Daily Dispatch and Dispatch Live. He is the former politics editor of Newsroom Africa and the current editor-in-chief of Eyewitness News. And as already said, he's the chairperson of SANEF. Sibusiso, I'd like to call you up to the stage or to the platform so that... Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Riho. Unfortunately, our chairperson, Usbu, couldn't make it. So yeah, he called on me to assist this morning. So yeah, my name is Regimwa Lucy. I work as Executive Director at the South African National Editors Forum. So I'm chipping in for Sbu since Sbu can't be here. The one thing about our members is that, as you may know, most of them are editors of daily titles. So the beauty about the newsroom is you wake up and you never know what's in store for you, because I was in there. So you get into the newsroom, you are editor-in-chief of Eyewitness News, and your day just get, thrown the other way. Riho, thanks a lot, and thanks for the welcoming remarks of SANEF as an organization. I think we are an organization that over the past 26 years, since that day in Cape Town, where two organizations meshed. It was, this year we're celebrating 26 years of the organization. It was two organizations, conference of editors, largely made of white editors. There was also the Forum of Black Journalists, largely made of black editors when the two organizations meshed. Over that past 26 years, we have seen SANEF growing to be an organization that has really grown to be arguably one of the most active editors forum, not only across our beautiful continent, but beyond the continent, across the world. We are the go-to organization when people really want to get in touch with editors, with journalists. I think our relationship with government, as Sispumla may know, over the past 28 years as a fraternity, it has really stood the test of time. But that test of time, I can attest that it has not been really smooth sailing. It's a relationship that we have had heated moments on both ends. And we are media practitioners that at times we believe that government communication professionals are not always forthcoming with the truth. They are always doing their best to protect their principles, while on the other side, we always have government communicators believing that we as the media, we're not doing due diligence when it comes to our reporting of late. There's been quite a number of accusations against us that we are lazy and all that. But I think the more regular engagement with government is certainly needed. And it's a conversation that we have spoken about. It's a conversation that we have had. We were quite encouraged when President Ramaphosa took over, and we had really two quick sessions with the president. The late minister of in the presidency, Mr. Jackson Mthembu, was really forthcoming, and he was amenable to the relationship with us as a fraternity. We are also quite encouraged that at the moment, the current minister, Minister Gungubele, is also on that side to say he really needs to start engaging more with the media. But I think Sispumla, we have raised this before, and we have said we as the fraternity, we are of the view that the engagement of government leaders, of government ministers, and the media fraternity as a whole, it has taken a dip. It has gone down, and it's not as open, it's not as robust as it used to be, and that's certainly something that we need to look at, because we used to do that quite a lot, and doing that quite a lot, it also used to allow for Chatham House rules. And I think as we work on that, we are quite encouraged. As you may know, we had a council meeting in Cape Town after SONA this year, and we were engaging with Minister Mqunu. And Minister Mqunu did exactly what we used to do over the past 2 decades or so, where he was really forthcoming to say, we are all adults in the room. It will be Chatham House rules, but I'll speak honestly about my portfolio, and I expect you to engage me honestly. So I think we need more of those, where it's not only a minister coming to us because there's a budget, coming, and they only want to talk to us about that budget, where the minister comes and says, there are issues I can see in the room, let's engage through those issues, and then let's talk through those issues. I think also we, as a fraternity and as government itself, I think we were quite happy together with SBU when the letter of invitation came, and we discussed it, and we said the Africa Comms Week has been a week that we have really appreciated over the years. But seeing that, COVID-19, what it has done in the past 3 years or so, and the week is back, let's go and be a partner as SANEF to this week, and then really come through, not only for us as an organization. I think we are always telling our peers from TAIEF and SAIEF. So TAIEF is the African Editors Forum, and SAIEF is the Southern African Editors Forum. We are members of both organizations. As you may know, the chairperson of TAIEF is a former member of SANEF. They are always saying to us, as South Africans, as SANEF in South Africa, you are quite lucky because you have regular, honest, and robust engagements with your government. And we say, yes, we are lucky, but there are lessons to be learned from there. So what COVID has done, as you may have heard, on the 3rd of May, it was World Press Freedom Day. So the African Editors Forum called us to Arusha in Tanzania, where UNESCO this year for World Press Freedom Day, they deemed the day itself as journalism under digital siege. So it's a theme that was quite emotional for us. As Sis Nomonde may know, we have already started very robust engagements with the guys from Meta, the guys from Google, where we are really talking about our media sustainability going forward, where we are saying this is the place we need as organizations, not only in South Africa, but across the continent, where we find the middle path for both organizations to speak. So our colleagues at TAIEF are quite encouraged as well to see that we are having this. They are quite encouraged to see that as SANEF, we are not behaving as if South Africa is not part of the continent. We are not behaving as if we are an island. We are behaving that we are part of this continent, and we acknowledge the kind of challenges that we are facing. And I think those challenges, they are not only through revenue generation when it comes to media sustainability from community media outlets all the way to commercial. We are also seeing challenges that vary from your misinformation, your disinformation, challenges that vary from aspects like cyberbullying that we see on the rise, that we hope as we engage government and policymakers, we can get a solution to say, how do we address issues of cyberbullying, particularly here in South Africa, where we see our women media practitioners face all kinds of bullying, face all kinds of threats and harassment. So those are the aspects, Sis Pumla, that hopefully after this, as we go forward, we can engage and say we shouldn't again come during Africa Month next month and talk about these issues. to say in the next 12 months, there's a lot of engagement that we have to do. We won't all the time agree in terms of our relationship definition, but these are some of the things that we need to do in the next couple of months. Thanks a lot, Program Director.
Thank you, Reggie, for those words. And I think very importantly that you mentioned the truth in reporting. As earlier mentioned, that if we're not going to stand by the truth and be those quality reporters that can also find expression, or our stories can make a difference in the SADC Media Awards, that stand out and elevated to gaining that award, then we would have lost ourselves as communicators. And thanks for that invitation that you're extending, that you had an engaging session with Minister Mchunu after SONA, and that you're encouraging that more of those happen. And the truth, South Africans or citizens, because we are all citizens before we are communicators, we appreciate the truth. In our homes, in our environments, we all seek the truth. So we should always understand that what we are is the same for all our citizens. So when Minister stood and say there are challenges, I'm sure it is appreciated by citizens, and that will take you upon that offer, and will make use of those engagements that you provide in terms of for the truth, for protecting principles. It's actually a very contentious and sensitive matter. That what do we say about what is next for Africa? As your colleagues from the other bodies that are similar to SANEF mentioned, that South African journalists are fortunate that they've got freedom of expression. Our constitution gives us that freedom of expression, freedom of speech. They do not have that. And can we say that moving above the curve as South Africa communicators, those impediments of not speaking the truth will actually see us staying below the curve? So media partners that are here, I think you should effect of the truth, that the truth, we need to report the truth, and our fellow journalists, that they assist us in that and confirm this industry as a quality industry. That is what we know and what we studied in our earlier years. So, ladies and gentlemen and colleagues, it's 12:30. Our program is also adjusting a little bit. It's also fluid, like I said earlier on. So the speaker that was supposed to come in from IDC will join us after lunch. And I'm happy to announce that lunch is served now at 12:30. We shall come back at, it's an hour. Yeah, it's an hour's lunch. So we shall return at 12:30. 1:30. 1:30. It's 12:30, 1:30. It's not 1 minute. Thank you, DG, for that. So we shall return